The Great Chamber of the Galactic Conclave was the largest structure ever built by intelligent life. It floated in the empty space between stars, a massive sphere of crystal and light that could hold millions of beings at once. For 12,000 years, this place had been the center of galactic power. 847 species sent their representatives here to make laws, settle disputes, and decide the fate of worlds. Today, they had gathered to judge humanity. Ambassador Kyle Patterson stood alone on the speaking platform at the center of the chamber. He was a tall man in his 50s with gray hair and calm eyes. Around him, rising up in endless tiers, sat the delegates of every known species in the galaxy. Some were humanoid. Others were clouds of gas or walking crystals or things that hurt to look at directly. All of them were watching him. The Archon of the Velith floated down from the highest tier. The Velith were beings of pure light, ancient beyond measure, and they had led the Conclave since its founding. This particular Archon was a shifting column of silver radiance that spoke directly into the minds of all present. "Humanity," the Archon began. "You stand accused of crimes against galactic order." Kyle said nothing. He simply listened. "In 32 years since first contact, your species has violated 17 trade agreements. You have stolen protected technologies and copied them without permission. You have expanded your colonies into 6 restricted zones. You have made contact with 4 primitive species and given them knowledge they were not ready for." The chamber hummed with disapproval. Thousands of alien voices murmured their anger. "Your people are aggressive," the Archon continued. "You breed too quickly. You consume too many resources. You do not respect the ways that have kept peace in this galaxy for thousands of years." Kyle felt the weight of a million eyes upon him. He kept his face neutral. "Therefore," the Archon declared, "by the unanimous vote of the High Council, Earth and all human colonies are hereby banned from galactic space. All treaties with humanity are cancelled. All human ships must leave Conclave territory within 90 rotations. Any human vessel found in our space after that time will be destroyed." The chamber erupted in approval. Beings cheered and celebrated. Some species had waited years for this moment. The troublesome humans were finally being put in their place. Kyle waited for the noise to die down. Then he did something that confused everyone watching. He smiled. "We accept your terms," he said simply. The Archon flickered with surprise. "You accept?" "Yes, we will withdraw as ordered. Is there anything else?" The Archon had expected arguments, begging, threats, not this quiet acceptance. "No, you may go." Kyle nodded politely, turned around, and walked out of the chamber. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Every being in that vast space watched him leave, and not one of them understood what they had just seen. Outside the chamber, Kyle walked quickly through the winding corridors of the station. His aide, a young woman named Grace Holloway, was waiting for him by the airlock to their ship. "Sir," she said, falling into step beside him. "What happened in there?" "The feeds cut out after the verdict. We got banned." Grace stopped walking. "We got banned? From the entire galaxy?" "That's right. And you're okay with this?" Kyle kept walking. "Get on the ship, Grace. We have a lot of work to do." Their vessel was called the Quiet Defiance. It was a small diplomatic ship, elegant but unarmed. Grace followed Kyle aboard and found him already on the bridge, staring out the main viewport at the swirling colors of a nearby nebula. "Sir," she said carefully, "I need you to explain what's happening. We just lost everything. Every trade deal. Every alliance. We lost nothing," Kyle interrupted. He turned to face her. "Grace, do you know why the Conclave let us join in the first place?" She thought about it. "Because we met their criteria for intelligence." Because we achieved faster than light travel? No. They let us join because they wanted to control us. They saw a young species with potential, and they wanted to put a leash on us before we grew too strong. He pulled up a holographic display showing the galaxy. Look at this. See where they let us settle? The outer edges. Dead systems. Planets no one else wanted. And the trade deals they gave us? We gave them 10 times more than we got back. Grace studied the display. She had never thought about it this way before. For 30 years, Kyle continued, we played their game. We followed their rules. We asked permission for everything. And you know what we got? Scraps, leftovers. The Conclave kept us weak on purpose. So, what do we do now? Kyle zoomed the display out. Beyond the borders of Conclave space, vast regions of the galaxy remained dark and unmapped. The Conclave had declared these areas worthless or dangerous. No one was allowed to explore them. Now, Kyle said quietly, we stop asking permission. Grace stared at the dark regions of the map. You planned this. You wanted them to ban us. I hoped they would. The Conclave was never going to let us grow. Every time we tried to expand, they blocked us. Every time we developed new technology, they demanded we share it. They were slowly strangling us, Grace, and most of humanity didn't even realize it. But now we're free. Now we're free. Kyle smiled again, but this time there was something fierce in it. The Conclave thinks they've punished us. They think we'll struggle alone in the darkness, begging to be let back in. They have no idea what they've actually done. What have they done? Kyle shut off the display and headed for the command chair. They've let us off the leash, and they're going to regret it. The quiet defiance undocked from the Conclave station and turned toward Earth. Behind them, the great crystal sphere glittered with the light of 1,000 species celebrating humanity's exile. None of them knew that they had just made the biggest mistake in. Galactic History. Grace sat down at her station and began preparing their course home. Her mind was spinning with everything Kyle had said. Part of her was terrified. They were alone now, cut off from the rest of intelligent life. But another part of her, a part she hadn't known existed, felt something else entirely. Excitement. Sir, she said, what happens when we get back to Earth? Kyle leaned back in his chair, watching the stars streak past as they entered faster than light travel. We call a meeting. Every leader, every scientist, every military commander. And we tell them the truth, which is, the galaxy just set us free. Now it's time to show them what humanity can really do. The ship flew on through the darkness between stars, carrying 2 people and a secret that would change everything. The Conclave thought they had solved the human problem. They were wrong. 5 years passed after the ban. The Conclave watched Earth carefully at first. Their sensors tracked every human ship as it retreated beyond the exclusion boundary. They counted every colony that went dark. They waited for the humans to come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. But the begging never came. Instead, there was only silence. Human space became a black spot on galactic maps. No signals came out. No ships tried to cross the boundary. It was as if humanity had simply vanished. The Conclave decided this was good. The human problem had solved itself. They stopped watching so closely. They had other matters to attend to. They had no idea what was happening in that silence. Captain Danny Cole stood on the bridge of his ship. The second chance, watching an alien sun grow larger in the viewport. It was a dim red dwarf star, old and dying, in a system that no Conclave species had ever visited. According to their charts, there was nothing here worth seeing. Their charts were wrong. Talk to me, Nora, Danny said to his chief science officer. What are we looking at? Lieutenant Nora Reyes was hunched over her sensor console, her dark eyes wide with disbelief. "Captain, I'm reading heavy metal deposits on the fourth planet. Iron, copper, titanium, and something else." "Something else?" "Beryllium, sir. Lots of it." Danny felt his heart skip. Beryllium was the rarest element in known space. It was essential for building faster-than-light engines. The Conclave controlled almost all of it, and they charged enormous prices for even small amounts. "How much is lots?" Nora ran the calculations 3 times before answering. "Based on these readings, this one system has more beryllium than the entire Veloth mining consortium." The bridge crew fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. A single deposit like this would make humanity rich. It would give them fuel for 1,000 ships, 1,000,000 ships. "Mark the coordinates," Danny ordered. "Claim it in Earth's name. Then we move on." His pilot, a young man named Chris Webb, looked up in surprise. "Move on? Sir, shouldn't we stay and start mining?" "That's not our job. Our job is to find things. Other people will come to dig them up." Danny sat down in his command chair. "Besides, if this system has beryllium, there might be more out here. We've barely scratched the surface." He was right. Over the next 5 years, human exploration ships spread across the unmapped regions of the galaxy like seeds in the wind. They found things the Conclave had never imagined. Stable wormholes that cut travel times from months to minutes. Abandoned space stations built by civilizations that had died before the Conclave even existed. Energy sources that made beryllium look like coal dot, and they found something else. Something that changed everything on Earth. In a secret laboratory buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, a scientist named Samuel Grant made the breakthrough of a lifetime. He was an older man, thin and tired-looking, with wild gray hair and fingers stained by chemicals. He had spent 20 years working on a single problem: how to pull energy directly from empty space. The Conclave said it was impossible. The laws of physics said it was impossible. Samuel Grant did it anyway. Zero-point energy extraction, he explained to the gathered military officers. His voice was hoarse from too many sleepless nights. "We can now harvest energy from the quantum vacuum itself. It's clean, it's limitless, and it makes everything else obsolete." Admiral Patricia Vance, commander of the newly formed Terran Defense Initiative, studied the glowing device on the table before her. It was small, no bigger than a human fist, but it hummed with more power than a nuclear reactor. "You're telling me this little thing can power a warship?" she asked. "This little thing can power a fleet," Samuel replied. "The Conclave uses antimatter reactors. Expensive, dangerous, limited. With this technology, we can build ships they can't even imagine." Admiral Vance was a hard woman. She had served in Earth's defense forces for 30 years and had seen humanity humiliated by the Conclave more times than she could count. She had watched their ships get laughed at. She had watched their soldiers get dismissed as PRIMATIV, ease. She picked up the zero-point generator and felt its warmth against her palm. "How soon can we build more?" 2 years for military use. 5 years for civilian. Make it 18 months. Samuel blinked. "Admiral, that's not. Make it 18 months, she repeated. "I don't care what it costs. I don't care how many people you need. The galaxy thinks we're finished. I want to prove them wrong." She turned to face the window, looking up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, the Conclave was celebrating their victory over the troublesome humans. Somewhere out there, 800 species were sleeping peacefully, confident that Earth would never threaten them again. "Build me a fleet," Admiral Vance said quietly. "Build me something that will make them remember our name." The construction began in secret. Deep in the Kepler Veil, a region of space filled with radiation that blocked all sensors, humanity built their shipyards. They worked day and night, year after year. They used the beryllium from the new mines. They used the zero-point generators. They used everything they had learned in 5 years of desperate exploration, and they built something new. The first ship of the Sovereign class rolled out of the shipyard exactly 18 months after Admiral Vance gave her order. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Sleek and angular, bristling with weapons that used technologies the Conclave had never seen. 30 more followed. On the day the fleet was complete, Admiral Vance walked the corridors of the flagship, the unyielding Spirit. She ran her hand along the smooth metal walls. She looked out the viewports at the other ships, floating in formation around her. Her communications officer approached with a report. "Admiral, we're receiving signals from Conclave space. It seems there's been an incident." "What kind of incident?" "An invasion, ma'am. A species called the Dreth is attacking Conclave systems. They've already taken 12 worlds." Admiral Vance felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Casualties?" "Millions, ma'am. And rising?" She closed her eyes. Part of her wanted to feel satisfied. The Conclave had kicked humanity out. They had called humans dangerous and primitive and unworthy. Let them deal with their own problems. But another part of her, the part that had become a soldier to protect people, couldn't ignore the numbers. Millions dead. More dying every day. Has the Conclave asked for help? "Not yet, ma'am. But our intelligence suggests they're considering it." Admiral Vance opened her eyes and looked out at her fleet. 31 ships, built in secret, crewed by the best humanity had to offer. Enough firepower to level planets, not enough to make a difference. "Tell Earth to stand by," she said. "If the Conclave calls, we need to be ready." "Ready for what, Admiral?" She turned to face her officer with an expression that was impossible to read. "Ready to remind the galaxy who we are." The Dreth came from the darkest edges of the galaxy. They were an insectoid species, with hard shells and many limbs and eyes that saw in spectrums most beings could not imagine. For centuries, they'd watched the Conclave grow fat and lazy. They had studied its weaknesses. They had built weapons specifically designed to destroy it. Now they were proving just how well they had prepared. Conclave fleet above the planet Cathos Prime was burning. 200 warships from a dozen different species hung dead in space, their hulls torn open by crystalline weapons that cut through shields like paper. Escape pods scattered in every direction as survivors fled the wreckage. On the surface below, 15 billion beings watched the sky and prayed to whatever gods they believed in. Cathos Prime was the oldest world in the Conclave. It was where the first treaties had been signed 12,000 years ago. It was the heart of galactic civilization, and it was about to fall. In the Conclave's command center, the Velith Archon watched the battle with growing despair. His silver light flickered weakly as another ship exploded on the tactical display. "We cannot hold them," he said to the gathered admirals. "Their weapons are beyond anything we have seen." "Then we retreat," suggested a Cathosi general, his blue scales pale with fear. "Save what we can." "Retreat to where?" "They have already taken 30 systems. They are faster than us, stronger than us." The Archon's light dimmed even further. "We have no options left." A young communications officer spoke up nervously. "There is one option, Archon. Speak. The humans." Silence fell over the command center. The Archon turned slowly to face the officer. "The humans are banned. They are not part of the Conclave." "No, Archon. But they have ships. They have weapons. Our intelligence suggests they have been building in secret for years. If we asked, we will not ask." The Archon's light flared with sudden anger. "We do not beg primitives for help. The humans were banned for good reason. They are dangerous and uncontrollable." "With respect, Archon," the officer said quietly, Right now the Dreth are more dangerous. And they are not uncontrollable. They are winning. The Archon said nothing for a long moment. Around him, the other officers waited in tense silence. Outside, another explosion lit up the sky as a Conclave cruiser died. Finally, the Archon spoke. Send a message. On Earth, Director Kyle Patterson received a transmission in his office. He read it 3 times, his expression unreadable. Grace Holloway, now his deputy director, noticed his stillness. What is it? Kyle handed her the tablet without a word. Grace read the message. Her eyes widened. They want our help? The same people who banned us? Who called us a threat to galactic stability? Yes. And what are they offering? Full restoration of our status. A seat on the High Council. Access to all Conclave space. Grace shook her head in disbelief. That's everything we wanted before. Everything they refused to give us. Yes. So we refuse, right? Let them deal with their own problems? Kyle stood and walked to the window. Outside, the Pacific Ocean sparkled under a clear blue sky. Somewhere far above, in orbit around Earth, the Terran fleet waited for orders. Do you know what the Dreth do to conquered populations? He asked quietly. I've heard rumors. They're not rumors. They eat their prisoners alive. They keep them conscious during the process because fear makes the meat taste better. Grace felt sick. I didn't know. 15 billion people on Kethos Prime. Grace. Civilians. Children. Beings who had nothing to do with the decision to ban us. Kyle turned to face her. Can I let them die just because their leaders made me angry? So we helped them. We helped them. But not for a council seat. His jaw tightened. We helped them because it's the right thing to do. And when we're done, the entire galaxy will know exactly who humanity is. 3 weeks later, the Terran First Fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel above. Kethos Prime. 40-7 Sovereign-class warships. 200 support vessels. And at the center of the formation, the flagship Unyielding Spirit, with Admiral Patricia Vance in command. The Dreth commander stared at his tactical display in confusion. These ships did not match any Conclave design. They were sleek and angular, covered in weapons he did not recognize. Where had they come from? Identify yourselves, he broadcast. Admiral Vance's response came through clearly. Her voice was calm and steady. This is Admiral Patricia Vance of the Terran Defense Initiative. You have attacked beings under our protection. Withdraw immediately, or you will be destroyed. The Dreth commander made a sound that might have been laughter. It was a wet clicking noise that made human skin crawl. Terran? Humans? The banned ones? You have no power here. Your tiny species was cast out like garbage. That's true, Vance replied. We were cast out. We spent 5 years alone in the darkness. Want to know what we built while we were there? I do not care what primitives build in their exile. This is not your war. Leave now and we might spare your little planet when we are finished here. Admiral Vance smiled. It was not a nice smile. Open fire. The battle lasted 20 minutes. Human weapons used zero-point energy to power directed energy beams that cut through. Dreth armor like it was made of paper. Human shields operated on principles the Dreth had never encountered, absorbing their crystalline attacks and redirecting the energy back at them. Human ships moved in perfect coordination, their crews linked by eye, systems that reacted faster than any organic brain. The Dreth had built their weapons to destroy the Conclave. They had not built them to fight humans. Ship after ship exploded as the Terran fleet advanced. The Dreth commander screamed orders that his surviving vessels could not follow. He tried to retreat, but the humans were everywhere, cutting off every escape route. In the end, he tried to surrender, Admiral Vance accepted. On Kethos Prime, 15 billion beings watched the sky clear of enemy ships. They watched the human fleet take up protective positions around their world. They watched rescue shuttles descend to help the wounded and dying, and they understood that everything they had been told about humanity was wrong. In the Conclave Command Center, the Velith Archon stood in silence as reports came in. The Dreth Armada was destroyed. Not a single human ship had been lost. The battle had lasted 20 minutes. The Conclave's combined fleet had fought for days and barely slowed the Dreth down. The humans had annihilated them in 20 minutes. How is this possible? The Archon whispered. We banned them. We cut them off. How did they become so powerful? No one had an answer. Aboard the unyielding Spirit, Admiral Vance allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Her crew was cheering. Her officers were congratulating each other. They had done something impossible. They had saved a world that had rejected them. Her communications officer approached with a tablet. Admiral, the Archon is requesting to speak with you. Vance took the tablet and read the message. It was full of gratitude and promises of rewards. Tell him thank you, she said. Tell him we'll continue pushing the Dreth back until they're no longer a threat. And tell him we don't want his rewards. What do we want, Admiral? Vance looked out the viewport at Kethos Prime, a beautiful blue world that would have died without them. We want them to understand who we are. Not dangerous primitives. Not a threat to galactic stability. Just people who help others when they're in trouble. She paused. Even when those others don't deserve it. The officer nodded and left to send the message. Admiral Vance stayed at the viewport, watching the stars. The war was not over yet. The Dreth had many more forces scattered across the galaxy. But for the first time in years, the Conclave had hope. And that hope had a human face. The war against the Dreth lasted 6 months. Human fleets swept through conquered territory like a cleansing fire. Every system the Dreth had taken was liberated. Every slave camp was broken open. Every survivor was given food, medicine, and a way home. And when it was over, the humans did something that shocked the entire galaxy. They gave everything back. Every world they had freed was returned to its original inhabitants. Every resource they had captured was handed over to those who had lost everything. They asked for no payment, no territory, no political favors. They simply helped, and then they left. But they did not leave entirely. Human ships began appearing throughout Conclave space. Not as invaders, but as traders and explorers and diplomats. They came with offers that were hard to refuse. Advanced medical technology that could cure diseases the Conclave considered permanent. Agricultural methods that could feed starving planets. Energy systems that made Rillium-based power look primitive. They offered these things freely, asking only for friendship in return, and species began to listen. Captain Danny Cole, now promoted to Commodore, commanded a humanitarian fleet that traveled from world to world offering assistance. He had spent 5 years exploring the dark edges of the galaxy. Now he was exploring something different, the possibility of peace. On the jungle planet of Theres 4, he met with leaders from 3 species who had quietly requested human help. They were small peoples, ignored by the Conclave for thousands of years. The sort of beings who were expected to follow rules without ever having a voice in making them. The Therasan Elder was a tall being with 4 eyes, and skin like tree bark. She studied Danny carefully as he sat across from her in the humid council chamber. "The Conclave told us you were dangerous," she said. Her voice was like wind through leaves. "They said if humans were given power, they would devour the galaxy." Danny shrugged. "What do you think?" "I think you saved 15 billion lives on Kethos Prime. I think you freed 30 worlds from the Dreth and asked for nothing in return." She paused. I think the Conclave was wrong about many things. We're not perfect, Danny admitted. We make mistakes. We fight among ourselves. Sometimes we do stupid things. He leaned forward. But we also believe that people should help each other, that the strong should protect the weak, that no one should be left behind. And what do you want from us? Friendship, trade, a chance to prove we are not what they said we are. The elder was silent for a long moment. Her 4 eyes blinked slowly. Around her, the other leaders watched and waited. Finally, she extended her hand. It was a human gesture. She had learned it specifically for this meeting. Then let us begin, she said. Danny took her hand and shook it gently. It was rough like bark, warm like sunlight. It was the beginning of something new. Back on Earth, Director Kyle Patterson faced a very different meeting. The Velith Archon himself had come to Earth, appearing in the diplomatic chamber as a towering column of silver light. He was not happy. You are undermining the Conclave's authority, the Archon declared. His mental voice crackled with anger. You make treaties without our approval. You offer technology without our permission. We are doing exactly what you told us to do, Kyle interrupted calmly. We are staying out of Conclave space. These species are Conclave members, who are free to talk with anyone they choose. Kyle pulled up a holographic display showing the Conclave's own founding documents. Article 7 of your charter guarantees all member species the right to form independent relationships. We're not breaking your laws. We're just using them. The Archon's light pulsed with frustration. You twist our laws against us. No, we just read them more carefully than you expected. Kyle stood and faced the Archon directly. Let me explain what's really happening, Archon. The galaxy is changing. For 12,000 years, the Conclave controlled everything. Every trade route, every technology, every decision. Species followed your rules because they had no choice. We maintain peace. You maintain control. There's a difference. Kyle gestured at the display. We didn't conquer anyone. We didn't threaten anyone. We just offered an alternative. And beings chose it. Not because we forced them, but because our way is better. Your way is chaos. Our way is freedom. The freedom to grow, to explore, to become more than what you decided they should be. The Archon flickered with emotions that Kyle could not read. This is not over. The Conclave will not simply disappear because humans wish it so. We don't want you to disappear, Kyle said. His voice softened slightly. We want you to change, to become something better than you are. You've spent so long controlling the galaxy that you forgot how to lead it. We're not your enemies, Archon. We're just showing everyone that there's another way. The Archon stared at him for a long moment. His silver light dimmed and brightened in patterns that might have been thought or might have been emotion. Then, without another word, he dissolved into particles of light and vanished. Grace Holloway stepped into the room after he was gone. That seemed tense. Kyle sat down heavily in his chair. It's going to get worse before it gets better. They're scared. And scared beings do stupid things. So what do? What we've always done. We keep building. We keep helping. We keep showing them who we really are. He looked out the window at the stars beginning to appear in the evening sky. Eventually, they'll understand. Or they won't. Either way, we stay true to ourselves. Across human space, the work continued. On a moon orbiting Neptune, scientists developed new food synthesis technology that could end hunger forever. On Mars, engineers designed ships that could reach distant stars in weeks instead of months. On 100 colony worlds, humans and aliens worked side by side, building something that had never existed before. They called it the Terran Cooperative. It was not a government. It was not an empire. It was simply an agreement. We help each other. We respect each other. We grow together. Species that had been ignored by the conclave for millennia found welcome in the cooperative. They brought their own knowledge, their own cultures, their own dreams. The mixture was strange and wonderful, and sometimes difficult, but it worked. Admiral Patricia Vance watched the growth with quiet satisfaction. She had spent her life preparing for war. Now she found herself overseeing peace. One evening, on her flagship orbiting Earth, she received a visit from an old friend. Danny Cole, now commander of the exploration fleet, had stopped by during a supply run. "You look tired," he observed, sitting across from her in her quarters. "I am tired," she admitted. "Building is harder than fighting. When you fight, the goal is clear: destroy the enemy. But building? The goal keeps changing. Is that bad?" She considered the question. "No, it's just different." She looked out the viewport at the blue curve of Earth below. "When I was young, I wanted to make humanity great. I wanted us to be powerful, feared, respected. I thought that was what mattered. And now? Now I want us to be good." She smiled slightly. "Powerful enough to protect ourselves, yes. But mostly good. The kind of species that helps others because it's right, not because it benefits us." Danny nodded. "That's what we're building." "I know. And that's what scares me." Her smile faded. "Because being good is hard. It's easier to be strong. It's easier to take what you want and ignore everyone else. What we're trying to do, this cooperative, this idea of helping without expecting anything in return, it goes against every instinct that kept our ancestors alive. But it's working, so far." She turned away from the viewport. "I just hope we can keep it working. Hope we don't lose ourselves along the way." Danny had no answer for that. Neither of them did. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Earth turn slowly below them. Outside, in the darkness between stars, the cooperative continued to grow. More species joined every month. More partnerships formed. More possibilities opened. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was leading the way. 20 years had passed since the conclave banned humanity from galactic space. Everything was different now. The conclave still existed, but it had been forced to change. The old ways of control and isolation no longer worked. Too many species had seen the human alternative. Too many had chosen freedom over fear. The Archons still held their councils and made their proclamations, but fewer and fewer beings listened. The Terran Cooperative had grown beyond anyone's imagination. Over 200 species worked together under its banner, trading and exploring and building a future that none of them could have achieved alone. There was no central government, no emperor, no archon, just an agreement to help each other and a shared belief that the galaxy was big enough for everyone. Admiral Patricia Vance had retired 5 years ago. Now she sat on the observation deck of her old flagship, the unyielding Spirit, watching visitors stream through the corridors. The ship had been turned into a museum, preserved in orbit around Mars as a reminder of what humanity had achieved. Her granddaughter Lily sat beside her. She was 18 years old, with curious eyes and questions that never stopped. "Tell me what it was like," Lily said. "When they banned us." Vance looked at the stars beyond the viewport. So many memories. So many battles, both physical and political. So much fear and hope and determination. "It was scary," she admitted. "We were alone, cut off from everything we had worked for. A lot of people thought it was the end, but it wasn't. No, it was the beginning." Vance smiled. "We spent so long trying to fit into their galaxy, following their rules, asking their permission. When they finally told us we weren't welcome, we realized we had been asking the wrong questions." "What questions?" "We kept asking how we could join them, how we could prove we were worthy." She shook her head. We should have been asking why we needed to join at all. Why we needed their approval. Why we couldn't just be ourselves. Lily thought about this. But now we have the cooperative. Isn't that just another version of the conclave? No, the conclave was about control. The cooperative is about choice. Every species that joins us does so because they want to, not because they have to. And they can leave whenever they want. Vance looked at her granddaughter. That's the difference between power and leadership. Power forces people to follow. Leadership inspires them to walk beside you. On Earth, in a lecture hall filled with students from a dozen different worlds, Dr. Samuel Grant was giving his final lecture. He was very old now, his hair white and his hands shaking slightly. But his mind was still sharp, and his eyes still sparkled with curiosity. Humanity's greatest strength, he told his audience, is not our technology. It's not our ships or our weapons or our zero-point generators. A young Tharacen student raised her four-eyed gaze. Then, what is it? Stubbornness. Samuel smiled. Our complete refusal to accept that something is impossible just because someone tells us it is. The conclave said we couldn't explore the dark regions of the galaxy. We did it anyway. They said we couldn't develop zero-point energy. We did it anyway. They said we couldn't survive without them. He spread his arms wide. Look at us now. The students looked around at each other. Human and Tharacen and a dozen other species, sitting together, learning together. But how do you know when to stop? The Tharacen asked. When to accept limits? Samuel laughed. It was a warm sound, full of joy. We don't. That's the secret. We never stop. We just keep pushing, keep trying, keep failing and getting back up. It's exhausting. It's frustrating. But it's who we are. He paused, looking out the window at the blue sky beyond. And that's what I want you to carry forward. Not our technology, not our methods, our spirit. The belief that tomorrow can always be better than today, if we're willing to work for it. The lecture ended. Students filed out, talking excitedly among themselves. Samuel stayed behind, watching them go. His assistant, a young man named Peter Walsh, approached with a cup of tea. That was a good speech, Peter said. It was my last speech, Samuel replied. Time to let younger minds take over. You've accomplished so much. We accomplished so much. Samuel took the tea and sipped it slowly. I just helped point the way. The real work was done by millions of people I'll never meet. Far beyond Earth, at the very edge of the galaxy, Admiral Danny Cole stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Endless Horizon. He had spent 50 years exploring the unknown. Now, at 70 years old, he was about to take the biggest step of all. The ship hung in empty space, surrounded by stars that suddenly seemed very far away. Ahead, visible only as a faint smudge of light, was the Andromeda Galaxy. 2 million light years distant. A journey that should have been impossible. His crew was mixed now. Humans, Tharacens, even a few former conclave species who had grown tired of stagnation. They had spent 5 years preparing for this moment. His first officer, a Tharacen named Kira, studied the navigation displays with all 4 of her eyes. The calculations are complete. The wormhole generator is charged. We can make the jump whenever you give the order. Danny looked around the bridge at his crew. They were nervous, excited, scared. Every emotion a person could feel before doing something that had never been done before. You know, he said, the conclave told us this was impossible. They said the distances between galaxies were too great. The energy requirements too massive. The risks too high. They told us a lot of things were impossible, Kira replied. They were wrong about most of them. Yes, they were. Danny smiled. It was the same smile his younger self had worn 50 years ago, standing on the bridge of the second chance. Discovering beryllium deposits in systems the Conclave had declared worthless. Engage the drive. The wormhole generator activated. Space bent and twisted. For a single terrifying moment, reality itself seemed to scream. Then they were through. The endless horizon emerged into a space that no human had ever seen. New stars. New patterns. New possibilities stretching in every direction. Kira's voice was barely a whisper. We did it. We actually did it. Danny looked out at the alien stars of Andromeda. Somewhere out there, new species waited to be met. New discoveries waited to be made. New friendships waited to be formed. Send a message back to Earth, he ordered. Tell them we made it. Tell them Andromeda is open. What else should I say? Danny thought about everything that had brought them here. The ban, the quiet years, the return, the building of something new and wonderful and fragile and strong. Tell them we're just getting started. The message raced back through the wormhole, carrying news that would change the galaxy forever. Humanity had reached Andromeda. The impossible had become possible once again. Back on Earth, in her small apartment overlooking the Pacific Ocean, Grace Holloway received the news. She was old now, retired from decades of diplomatic service, but she still remembered standing beside Kyle Patterson on the day of the ban. Kyle had died 10 years ago, peacefully surrounded by friends. His last words had been simple, not bad for a banned species. Grace smiled at the memory. She walked to her window and looked up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, she could see. Humanity was taking its next great step, and all because 20 years ago, the galaxy had tried to throw them away. They had smirked, walked away, and built something magnificent, not because they were told they could, but because no one could tell them they couldn't. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not technology, not power, not conquest. Hope. The belief that no matter how dark things seemed, tomorrow could always be better. And as the stars turned overhead, as human ships explored new galaxies and human hands reached out in friendship to species that had never seen them before, that hope burned brighter than ever. It was, Grace thought, a good legacy. It was the only legacy that mattered.